Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the way Boris Johnson's bandwagon seems to be gearing up for the first tilt at Rishi Sunak this year, as they aim to gradually weaken his authority in order to replace him with the blonde buffoon again. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, I think I'd certainly imagine that the first major battle between Johnson and Sunak, albeit a proxy skirmish amongst their supporters, would be with the local elections. Sunak could dodge other conflicts for a while, but the local elections are set in stone, and there's zero way that any Tory leader right now is going to avoid a right walloping this May. But there seems to be some noise around the Northern Ireland Protocol now. The Telegraph have published an article which suggests that an agreement is sort of done and it's going to be announced within the next couple of weeks, maybe even next week. Now, this doesn't mean an agreement has been reached or that there will be an announcement before the end of this month, because I've not yet seen the same news reported in outlets that are not involved in Boris Johnson's push to destabilise Sunak. And there are certainly other outlets that have been following the protocol events very closely. And the Telegraph being the Telegraph, I wouldn't put it past them to be reporting this, at least to be embellishing things in order to put the cat amongst the pigeons. I mean, let's imagine a scenario. So let's say that this story is essentially, well, not necessarily fabricated, but they're taking an optimistic outlook from someone involved in the process, embellishing a few things, leaving some other things out. And before you know it, you've got a protocol deal's basically done. We're going to announce it in the next week or two. And if, let's say, Tory MPs in the ERG, including in Cabinet, read this and go, well, hang on, what's going on? We didn't think there was a deal on the offing. See, both of the government ministers in the Northern Ireland office, who, presumably will be very much involved in the process, they're in the ERG. So if they were thinking to themselves, hang on, we haven't got a deal, they might be particularly perplexed by a story saying we have. After the story of the secret conference last week to discuss ways of working more closely with the EU, this might appear to be another softening of Brexit that Sunak is keeping from the hardliners in his party. To what end, you may ask? Well, the ERG will be crucial to Johnson's plans. The simple mathematical fact of the matter, Boris Johnson's not going to become Prime Minister until over half of all Tory MPs, and you probably think more than that, want him to be again. And even that sounds unlikely. Now, consider that Boris Johnson could have replaced Liz Truss. As far as we know anyway, party members were prepared to vote for Boris Johnson. He had the nominations. Oddly enough, he had the nominations. But he pulled out because he thought the party would be too divided for him to govern. Well, it's not really in a better position now, is it? But for whatever reason, he now wants to replace Sunak. There are reasons I can speculate on, but I want to focus on what his allies are doing. They are pointing to this article in the Telegraph, which may or may not be accurate, and saying that if the deal is a bad one, there will have to be ministerial resignations, and that could be the beginning of the end for Sunak. And certainly Sunak has made himself vulnerable in two ways. First, in not pushing a main agenda which is designed to win the approval of target voters. That was madness. The culture wars are of some value to them, but it's of limited value in terms of the general election. It's in a cost of living crisis. Culture wars do work, and they have worked for the Tories. But in a cost of living crisis, it's not really what most people are focused on. The irony is, as well, it's actually easier for him to deal with the cost of living crisis, at least to alleviate it, which would win wider approval, than to try and persuade people that the small boats, which actually only started under the Tories, was never a thing before, is a reason to vote Tory again. As a result, his poll ratings have been suffering. This makes him vulnerable. Johnson was not deposed because his behaviour was unacceptable. That was just an excuse. His behaviour did not change in 2022. It has always been like that. He was deposed because people had got sick of his behaviour and he was going to cost the Tories the next election, possibly with very heavy losses. Well, the polls currently suggest that Sunak will do no better. In fact, some Tory MPs cannot really look at the picture and be sure that that might not be the case. I've noticed, according to one pollster, the Conservatives actually gained in the last week. Now, what might that be? I suggested earlier this week it might be the visit of President Zelensky and Rishi Sunak using that to distract us from some of the more damaging news in the media. But no. The ones who are trying to undermine Sunak are going, oh, no, that's actually Lee Anderson. Oh, yeah, it's Lee Anderson that's done all that. So you look at some Tory MPs and they'll, depending on how they want to interpret various polling results, may well think to themselves, well, we thought we were going to lose under Johnson, but we didn't think we were going to lose this badly. The second vulnerability was in promoting prominent members of the ERG to his government, including cabinet. Now, he may have felt he had to do it, but now that he has, he needs to keep them on side. These are the sort of MPs who will throw the party and government stability into chaos. There are some ministers where if they had to be removed, like Gavin Williamson, like Nadhim Zahawi, who will play along for the sake of party unity. But there are some, like in the ERG, that don't care about the party. If they don't get their way, they will throw the party into chaos. It is the reason they have been getting their way for so many years now. And when you see Johnson supporters talking about the trouble it will cause with the ERG, if the protocol deal is bad, you know that they intend to claim that it is bad regardless. And it will be easy for them to do so. Really easy. Because they've got this nebulous commitment to sovereignty. But sovereignty is always watered down in any agreement. You always sacrifice some sovereignty because an agreement has give and take on both sides. John Major was saying last week, we sacrifice sovereignty to be in NATO. But they don't complain about that. We'd have sacrificed sovereignty for the US trade deal. A lot of it as well. That now looks unlikely. We've sacrificed sovereignty by privatising our public services. That's control that's gone away. Control over energy prices. Our energy prices are double those in France because we sacrificed sovereignty to privatise energy. We've sacrificed sovereignty for all the trade deals we've been getting, the ones we have been agreeing around the world. In fact, we've lost more sovereignty with our Australia trade deal than we ever sacrificed to be in the EU, where we were deciding matters. The bottom line is that whatever is agreed as a practical implementation of the protocol, whenever that happens, it will be in line with the actual Northern Ireland Protocol, as detailed in the withdrawal agreement. The withdrawal agreement is not being rewritten at all. These negotiations are not changing one word of that agreement. They're just agreeing on how to implement it in practical terms to make sure that it meets the aims without lots of unintended consequences. Now, that means two things. First, there will be trade friction on at least some goods passing from Britain to Northern Ireland. Second, the European Court of Justice will have a role in deciding matters of EU law in Northern Ireland. There will no doubt be various safeguards and fudges in the agreement, there always is, but it will acknowledge those two facts. And any hard Brexiteer that wants to can therefore describe it as a bad deal on that basis. That being said, I don't think Sunak will agree anything unless he has the ERG on side. It would be an interesting move. So he will probably have to buy them off with something else in order to get their agreement on it. Just as Boris Johnson did with the original withdrawal agreement. He bought them off with promises to scrap it, basically. But Johnson's mob can still use this to put pressure on the ERG. So let's say a deal is announced. Let's say the ERG say, yeah, this is actually quite a good deal. Johnson's allies in the media could accuse them of selling out. Essentially, I can see this going one of two ways. So first, if we assume that the story is actually not entirely accurate, it could just be a way of making the ERG suspicious of Sunak, sow the seeds of mistrust. There doesn't have to be an immediate payout, but first of all, the secret conference to work closely with the EU. Then this deal in the offing, like, well, what's that about? Just make them doubt Sunak's sincerity with them. He will deny things, of course, but the ERG is dishonest as any other politician. They don't believe the words of another politician. And this mistrust can be fed on the ideas that Hunt, they'll go back, Hunt was supposedly in favour of a Swiss-style Brexit a few months ago. He had to deny it, but, it was considered a credible source. Now Sunak's organising this conference for various stakeholders to discuss how we work more closely with the EU, which inevitably means closer alignment, not further divergence. Second, so let's say the story's accurate. The Telegraph do occasionally report actual news. Then it can only come to pass with ERG support, or at least the support of those members of the ERG in government. The ERG themselves could be split. Sunak cannot afford resignations, really, at least not as a result of disagreements with the Prime Minister. He's going to have to accept a few because of poor behaviour on the part of the Minister. So Johnson's allies will accuse the ERG of going soft on sovereignty in return for nice, cushy government positions. Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah, you talk a good show, but when it comes to your 40 grand a year extra for being a minister, all of a sudden, oh, you think this soft Brexit deal's all right now, do you? They'll put pressure on both the ERG ministers as well as the non-ministers in the ERG by painting them as betraying the Brexit vision. Even this doesn't need an immediate payout, just enough to make those involved feel the pressure should the main prize not be forthcoming. Because if the protocol is finally done and dusted as a political hot potato, let's say by the end of this month it's basically sorted, there is then the retained EU law bill to navigate. Obviously for Johnson's allies, there's the Privileges Committee investigation for them to navigate, but they're doing quite well so far in massively disrupting those proceedings. But basically, if it turns out that the Telegraph are actually reporting the facts, then I think we can expect an attempt to create divisions over the protocol agreement immediately. Most Tory MPs will be happy that a pointless distraction has been dealt with, I'm sure, but that won't matter if Johnson's allies can start to drive a wedge between Sunak and the ERG. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.